Welcome back to part 2 of Heavyweight Championships of the 90s, 1993. Now, October the 1st, 1993, Cardiff Arms Park in Wales. Lennox Lewis would make the second defence of his WBC heavyweight title against Frank Bruno. Now, this is historic for one reason. This was the first time two British fighters had met for the world heavyweight title. It never happened before. This was the first time. Obviously, Lennox Lewis had been awarded the title after Riddick Bowe threw it in the bin. He successfully defended it against Tony Tucker. This was his second defence. Now, Frank Bruno, if you're not British, you don't understand what Frank Bruno meant to the British people. People in Britain loved Frank Bruno, and we still do to this day. Frank Bruno is a hero. He brought many eyes to the sport. He was a nice guy. He was a knockout artist. Maybe not at the highest level, but he was a knockout artist. He brought big numbers to British terrestrial television. He was a nice guy. Now, he'd failed twice in the past. He'd failed in 1986 against Tim Witherspoon and 1989 against Mike Tyson. However, he did hurt Mike Tyson in that fight. Not a lot of people gave Frank a lot of hope in this fight against Lewis, but he did very well. Now, in the second round, Bruno actually hurt Lewis with a right hand. He actually pushed Lennox Lewis back with a right hand. He was controlling the fight with his jab, and he really did put it on Lewis. He was catching Lewis with that jab coming in and smashing him with that right hand every time they got close. And when they got in close, he was hammering him to the body, hammering him to the head. And Lewis was very, very, very out of sorts. The fight did get a bit messy at times. There was a lot of wrestling on the inside. Mickey Van, the referee, did actually have to pull them both apart and say, "Yeah, stop the bullshit. Yeah, there's no need for this. Stop it." But Bruno was really, really, really putting it on Lewis. And Lewis didn't quite know what to do. At times, he looked lost in there. He wasn't expecting it from Frank. Frank was working so masterfully behind that jab, and he was dropping that right hand over the top at times. And Lewis, I mean, his left eye was swelling up at one point. And yeah, it was a really good fight, really, really entertaining fight, especially from a British fan's point of view. I remember watching this live with my parents, and we all wanted Frank to win. As much as I love Lennox Lewis now, and I did then, Frank was a different character. Frank Bruno was a different character. You know, he was very much beloved in this country. Everybody loved Frank. I was only 10 years old. We all loved Frank. We loved Lennox, but Frank Bruno was something special. We all wanted to see Frank get the big one. In the seventh, Lewis managed to smash Frank Bruno with a left hook, which really, really, really shook Bruno, and he staggered into the corner. Lewis pinned him on the ropes, and he just fired right uppercuts. Bang, 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 bang. There was a little bit of confusion at one point. It looked like Mickey Van, the referee, was going to step in and stop it. Lewis put his hands up. He thought he'd won. And yeah, it was all weird. People didn't know at the time, what was he counting? Was Mickey Van counting? Was he stopping the fight? He waved it in. A few more right uppercuts, right hands on the ropes. Bruno was done. The fight was waved off. Lennox Lewis was very lucky in that fight. He was coming undone at times in there. I mean, again, it was quite early in his career. I mean, he'd only turned pro in 1989. This was his toughest fight, especially as a professional and especially as a heavyweight champion. I mean, Tony Tucker didn't really offer a lot of resistance in their fight. And Frank Bruno came to fight, and he gave him a hard time. And it was a bit of British history. Like I say, two Brits fighting for a heavyweight title. Never been done before. Never been seen before at the time. So, yeah, Lennox Lewis retained his title. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Fantastic performance. And, yeah, Lewis built his stock after that. There was a lot of questions at the time whether or not Frank Bruno would retire. Obviously, he wouldn't. But at the time, it was kind of advised that he should quit because, yeah, this was his third bite at the Golden Ring. He'd failed, so who knows. A few weeks later, October the 29th, 1993, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Tommy Morrison would make the second defence of his WBO title against Michael Bent. Now, Michael Bent was born in London, in England, but he lived in New York pretty much most of his life. So the Brits claim him, but the Americans also claim him. Now, this one was a hell of an upset at the time. Now, this was supposed to be a warm-up. Now, they were trying to build up to a big unification fight between Lennox Lewis and Tommy Morrison at the time. All they had to do was come through their fights. Now, obviously, Lennox Lewis had come through his fight against Frank Bruno, and Tommy Morrison just had to come through Michael Bent, who no one had really heard of at the time, and they were supposed to meet for a big multi-million-dollar unification fight. However, it went horribly, horribly wrong. Michael Bent, Tommy Morrison balled forward. He was desperate to get the fight over as quickly as possible, and he ran into a right hand from Michael Bent. Tommy Morrison was dropped. He took a count. Moments later, he was down again. He looked absolutely stunned and all over the place. His eyes were rolling around in his head. And after a few more punches, he went down again. And this was a huge upset. Now, at the time, the WBO had a third knockout rule. If somebody went down 3 times in a round, the fight was automatically ruled a TKO. And that was that. Probably unfair at times, but I think in this fight it was fair. Tommy Morrison was absolutely finished. He was finished, totally finished in that fight. So Michael Bent was now the new WBO heavyweight champion, and Tommy Morrison was back to square one, back where he was in 1991 after Ray Mercer had finished with him. It was a real shocker. No one expected that. And Morrison, this would be Morrison's last bite at the Big Cherry. He never challenged for another world title after this. And in 1995, he would test positive for HIV, and that would effectively end his career as a professional. He did fight a few more times, here and there sporadically with weird rules and different bits and pieces, but ultimately he would die. I think it was in 2012, maybe a bit earlier. I'll have to double check that. And it was a real tragic story for Tommy Morrison, but this would be the last time you'd see Tommy Morrison in a world title fight. Very, very sad. Yeah, he made a big impact on me as a young man. I was a huge Tommy Morrison fan from the Rocky V. A lot of people hate Rocky V, and I totally understand it. I liked it. I was only 7 when that film came out. I liked it. I was a big fan of all Rocky films. Obviously, as an adult, you look back at it and kind of go, yeah, it's a pretty fucking weak film. But you've got to remember, I was 7 years old at the time. Tommy Morrison became a big household name for us. And to watch him fight was always an honour for me. And he has a lot of memories for me. Whether or not you like the guy or not, he was terrible. He had a weak chin, he had a glass chin, whatever. He was entertaining. And it was sad the way he went out. Anyway, moving on. The last fight of this 1993, November the 6th, 93, at Caesars Palace in Nevada. Riddick Bowe would make the third defence of his world heavyweight titles, the WBA and IBF belts, of course, against his former foe, Evander Holyfield, who he took the belt from a year prior. Now, this fight had a lot of build-up to it. Holyfield had a comeback fight since the loss against Alex Stewart. He didn't look particularly good in that particular fight, but he got the decision, fair enough. So people were expecting Riddick Bowe to kind of walk through Holyfield, and a lot of people were expecting it to be over by like the 5th or 6th round. First 3 rounds, Riddick Bowe took control. He was working well behind the jab. He ran out in the first round and smashed Holyfield with a straight right hand, well, an overhand right hand that shook Holyfield, and it kind of looked like this is where it was going to go. First 3 rounds, Bowe just battered Holyfield everywhere. He was working so well behind the jab. He was working the uppercut on the inside. Just his size, his weight, everything was superior. Now in the 4th, Holyfield started to come back. He was putting his punches together nicely. He was working well behind the jab. He was throwing combinations to the head and body. And at the end of the 4th, there was a slight cut on Bowe's left eye. Now Bowe had been complaining a bit to the referee about headbutts. Now this would be a thing that would follow Holyfield throughout his whole career. He was a bit careless with the head at times. It wasn't necessarily in this fight. It wasn't intentional, but it was kind of there. It was always there with Holyfield. He was always accused of using his head a bit too much. Round 5 and 6, Holyfield took over. Bowe looked very, very tired by this point. Holyfield was just controlling with a jab. He was smashing right hands in there. He was working well on the inside. He was working well to the head and body. and he actually hurt Bowe at the end of the 5th with a couple of right hands. Bowe just looked like he was about ready to go. And then in the 7th round, this is the incident that kind of overshadowed the whole fight, really. It was quite sad, really, that this fight is mainly remembered for this. Now, there was a fucking idiot called James Miller, also known as the Fan Man, who crashed into the middle of the ring about a minute into the 7th. He had a big fan on his back. Now, if you've never seen this or never heard about this, this is going to sound again like I'm making it up, like the previous video with Tim Tomaszek. He had a big fan on his back and a big parachute, and he managed to get over the top of the building and he dropped into the middle of the ring. Now, this halted the fight for over 20 minutes. This clown, he crashed into the ring, got his parachute caught up in the lights. He was attacked at ringside by members of security, the police, Bowe's people, you know, and he was carried out of there eventually. The guy was just a fucking moron, absolute moron. I mean, why would you do this, for Christ's sake? He's just an attention-seeking asshole. The fight was, like I say, was delayed for over 20 minutes. Riddick Bowe's wife, who was pregnant at the time, she fainted at ringside and was taken to hospital. Bowe wasn't made aware of this. He had no idea that this was going on. The fight resumed. Holyfield finished the round strong. He out-jabbed Bowe. He was landing the combinations, you know what I mean? You know, Holyfield was still taking the fight in the 8th. He was just working better. He was landing that right hand at will. He was working better, but he was just landing more punches. More eye-catching, the more devastating stuff was coming from Holyfield. Bowe was jabbing well in the 9th. He did hurt Holyfield with a couple of right hands. The 10th and the 11th, they just fought head-to-head. They were just both forehead to forehead, just winging away. Both guys were just absolutely fucking going for each other. Head and body, hooks, uppercuts, everything. They were just really, really, really pushing it. Both guys wanted to win this fight. 12th, I think Bowe took this round. Holyfield had his moments. I just thought Bowe did better in the 12th round. Both guys, they left nothing. They left nothing they just gave they gave their all. They gave their all. They just both pushed and pushed. They wanted this fight, and it was a great sequel to their first fight from the year before. Now, I personally thought the year before's one was better, but this fight was fucking brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I had Holyfield just nicking it. The scores were 114-114, a draw. 115-114, 113, 115-113 to Holyfield. So a majority decision win for Evander Holyfield. Can't argue with that. It was a great fight. Evander Holyfield once again WBA and IBF heavyweight champion. So we ended the year. Evander Holyfield once again was king of the mountain. He was the lineal champion, plus he had the WBA and IBF titles. Lennox Lewis was the WBC champion. And Michael Bent, the forgotten man of heavyweight boxing, was the WBO champion. So join me next time for 1994. I hope you enjoyed this. Sorry it's taken so long to get this video out. I've been very busy. I've been doing so much research for this fight. Finally got it out. I've had to do it in 2 parts because I had to stop halfway through. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you stick with me. Thank you, folks. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.